Every day, people use Cisco U to bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Welcome to the Cisco Learning Network. Let us walk you through some of the powerful features available to the community. The personalized homepage is focused on featuring the content you follow and engage with on a daily basis, as well as the valuable learning resources offered to support you in your learning journey. The training videos section quickly helps you find IT training videos on a variety of technology topics to help you in your Cisco certification studies. Find listings for live IT training webinars and events that you can attend in person. Learn on the go and stay a part of the community wherever you are with a mobile-friendly experience. Your community hub allows you to easily ask questions, share ideas, and connect with other members as you prepare for your certification exams. Sign up for upcoming live technical webinars by checking our latest events listings for continuous lifelong learning. Let us be your resource, guide, and community as you continue your career journey. The Cisco Learning Network, your lifelong learning IT community.
So what are some of these benefits of certification? We talked about, is IT right for you? Is this the kind of thing that you're getting into? But once you're in, why would you get certified? So you could learn the technology perhaps without getting certified, but why do you want to be certified? And we're going to go through a lot of these things in the slides coming up, and you're going to see how some of these words in this big word cloud here kind of fit in and really spell out that value for certification. But a lot of times it is show me the money. It's coming back to how exactly is this really going to benefit me? And just to let you know that the average US network engineer has a salary increase of 15% with certification. That's always going to vary, obviously, but that certified individual, and we'll see why, we'll talk about why in a few slides here, that certified individual does bring a lot of gravitas, and there is a need for that person, especially that person who is truly passionate and who's truly on that lifelong learning journey. And that is why certification is so valuable to employers and thus to us, the individuals. And that brings us to confidence. Once you have that knowledge, you're confident in when someone asks for your opinion, when someone comes to you and says, what is the best way? Or in your opinion, how do you think we should solve this? Or what solution should we go for? Or what technology should we use in this particular area? Your answer with that certification, with that credential, brings you exude that confidence, and you can say, well, in my certified and my expert opinion or my professional opinion, this is what we should do and this is why. And you can bring that why over there, and then people look to you to say, I trust this person, I will use them, they've brought me good answers in the past, they clearly know what they're talking about, they're a key and critical member to our team. And then there's that value. It is that 360-degree value. That's not just about what it does for you, because if it's giving you knowledge and it's giving you confidence, when you're in that interview, when you're doing that job, when you're putting out that metaphorical fire in the data center, you are more attractive to your organization, your knowledge, your skills, you're delivering instant value, which your employer says, this is fantastic. This person is someone who I can count on to deliver when we're tactically, when we're reactive. And I can also count on this person to be more forward thinking, more of a technologist. They bring up ideas, they bring up thoughts of how we can do things differently in our organization, how we can better use technology. And then no matter what organization, what company you're in, you have someone, some group of customers, some group of stakeholders, be it their internal or their external, and you bring value to them because you understand what they need, what they're going through, and how technology can be used to better improve that. So you're able to say, you know what, this is a challenge that our customers or users, let's use the word users, are seeing. This is how we might better improve that. That again goes back into that cycle, into that 360 degrees, where it's giving you, giving your employer back that value because maybe now they're more competitive, they're making more money, they're delighting their customers. And then that's back to you because you look good in doing that. And that could lead to bonuses, lead to promotion, and that kind of thing. And something I want to point out, and I mentioned it before, that lifelong learning. We don't want to look at certification as the end of our journey. We don't want to say, you know what, I got certified, I'm good. We should always be learning. And that's one of the things about IT. I've been at Cisco now just over 23 years. I've liked this area of technology around operations, like network operations, including automation, programmability of networks. And that didn't really exist when I started. So certainly network operations existed, and we were using technologies like Telnet and SNMP and then SSH to kind of manage these devices, but we were doing it all very manually. We were connecting to device by device, and operations has greatly improved, or I would say innovated and transformed with this idea of net DevOps, or the bringing in of automation, bringing in of programmability into this. So even something as kind of basic as network operations has transformed over the years, and we're always seeing that this industry is always going to be changing. So if you like that change, if you like being part of this kind of forefront of how we are as a society are doing a lot of things now, this is the place for you. And you do have this opportunity to always be learning as you go, always be taking on those new skills. And Cisco, as part of our certification program, we have a program called Continuing Education that as you learn those new skills, you keep your certifications current, so you never lose that credential that's so valuable to you. So I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to Cisco certifications. There's a lot more to come. You're on a fantastic journey. And I think if you're that person who likes being that agent of change, who likes solving those tough problems, who likes thinking like a detective, and who likes interconnecting people and things, you are absolutely in the right place. Thanks. I look forward to talking to you as a certified individual soon.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rigo Villa. I'm one of the community managers on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host today. In this session, we're going to be covering ISE update for Microsoft Security Identifiers with our speaker and presenter, Pavan Gupta. But before we get started, I wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, I want to let our attendees know that this session is being recorded and will be made available on demand within approximately 5 business days after today. And we'll be sharing some information on how you can access that recording a little bit later on. Next, I would like to take a moment to address Q&A and poll questions. We will be using Slido for any and all questions during the live event, so please feel free to submit your inquiries using Slido, and one of our amazing panelists will be ready to assist. Additionally, with Slido, we're going to be launching a few poll questions throughout the presentation, and to make sure you are ready to participate in any questions and also to um, participate with the polls, you can go ahead and scan that QR code on your screen with your mobile device, or you can go ahead and log in directly through our ISE live streams page. We're also going to be using Slido to launch a survey at the end of this live stream, and we would really appreciate it if you can just take a moment to fill it out and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback and comments. And for your convenience, you can also find a list of ICE resources on the left-hand side of your Slido window. And one important thing to note about Slido is that it's only available to our live audience. So if you're watching the session on demand, the polls and the question submissions will not be active for you. So it's just something to keep in mind as you watch the session at a later date. And finally, I'd like to share information about the next ICE event that we have. So the upcoming session on the schedule is ICE certificates with Let's Encrypt, and that's going to take place on Tuesday, May 27th. We invite you to register for this session if you haven't done so already. You can register using the short link on your screen under the resources, or you can also find it on the left-hand side of your Slido window. And without any further delay, I am now going to hand it over to our speaker to get us started. So, Pavan, if you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Rigo. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for joining us today. So the today topic is going to be ICE update for Microsoft Security Identifiers. My name is Pavan Gupta. I'm a technical marketing engineer in Security BU. So this is what the agenda I'm going to be covering. What exactly the Microsoft update is, and who is basically supposed to be looking at this webinar. So that's your basically intended audience, who is impacted and what exactly that impact is and what is the fix around it. So if you go through it, obviously you don't have to, if at all you're not impacted, if you're not the one who is actually looking for this, you can actually skip it. Now, before even diving into the minute details of that impact and how the fix is going to be given from the ICE standpoint, I want to actually go through some basics part of it, how ICE and MDM UEM integration works, and what are the different flavors of MDM V2 APIs, V3 APIs available, and what are the MDM V3 API compliant vendors are, and some optimization plus the features which was introduced in the ICE releases. Then after, I'm going to be going deeper into especially talking about Microsoft Intune integration with ICE and how is it impacted because of this Microsoft security update. And then we're going to be talking about the fix. So without further delay, let's get started on it. Um, so the reason for this webinar is because of this field notice. So the link was already pasted in the Slido resources. So you can actually find those links. And whoever is actually having any doubts regarding this field notice, they can be over here. Okay. The webinar is totally around this field notice and the Microsoft update. Because of a Microsoft update, we have to actually provide this field notice. So I'm going to be starting poll questions. So if you're already ready, please join the Slido 1674481. You can scan the QR code as well displayed on your screen, and you can participate into it. I'm going to give a couple of seconds for you to log in so that you can actually participate in the poll questions. I'm going to be starting the poll question now. The first poll question is going to be, are you using Active Directory certificate services and Windows Domain Controller that service certificate-based authentications? Wow. Wow. I'm going to be giving some another a few more seconds for you to actually fill in the survey. Oh, it's very tight. So more than 80%, I would say 82 or 83% of the people are actually making use of this Active Directory services. Well, in that case, you can actually stay on. The second poll question is going to be, do you use certificate-based authentication and certificate attribute lookups against Active Directory? So you use, so 80, more than 82 or 83% of the people were making use of a domain controllers. But in the ISE, they were doing a certificate-based authentication. You guys were making use of ISE for a certificate-based authentication and certificate attribute lookups as well. It seems more than 70% of you guys were making use of certificate-based authentication and lookups against Active Directory. Now, the third poll question is on, have you integrated Microsoft Intune to your Cisco ISE for compliance check? So are you making use of Intune for the MDM compliance check? Great, great. I see very good results over here. Well, so it seems I can actually normalize it to 70%. So for 70% of the audience over here, it's applicable. This webinar is applicable. This is good, actually. So for the rest of the people, you can stay on or you can actually watch this webinar later point of time, whenever you want to actually make use of the Microsoft Intune integration plus certificate-based authentication. So 70% of the people were making use of this, and this is the reason why we were doing this webinar. Now, let's get into the what exactly that Microsoft update is. KB50144754. That a link was already pasted in the Slido for your reference. It's basically applicable to all Windows domain controllers or Windows servers or even domain controllers having the certificate services on top of it. Whoever is doing the certificate based authentication against this KDC, that certificate can be emulated by the attacker using these vulnerabilities, and they can get the privileged access or a privilege escalation is possible. So basically, using the certificate attributes, they can manipulate the certificate attributes and get the new certificates or get a privileged access as well. So in order to address that, Microsoft already released an update long back during May 2022 timeframe. I hope it's been already 3 years. I believe this update, the Microsoft security update, was already available in your domain controller. Oh, so it's been already 3 years. You are already making use of it already, but you might not be knowing it. So what exactly it is? We know whenever the certificate based authentication is happening against the domain controller, the privileged escalation is possible by having or by manipulating the certificate attributes like a subject alternative name, etc. Microsoft was asking you to map the security identifiers. Every device, every user being managed in the Active Directory has a security identifiers associated to it. Those security identifiers can be manually mapped against your Active Directory straight away, or you can also actually issue new certificates. So you might be having the certificates, and if at all you feel that the certificate, renewing the certificate or issuing the new certificates to the all these endpoints and users is becoming an operation challenge for you, Microsoft was already giving you an option to manually map this alternate alt security identifiers in AD users or device properties. There are two possibilities here in order to address this. It's basically you're doing a stronger mapping of your uh, security identifiers in the certificate itself so that your Active Directory can check, can validate whether it is indeed given to Pawan's laptop or Pawan user. That's what exactly it was doing. That's what this Microsoft update article is meant for. So if at all you're manually mapping everything into your Active Directory users or device properties, you don't require ISE update at all. If you are reissuing the certificates by imprinting the security identifiers into it, yes, then there is an impact and you are supposed to update your ISE. How we could do it? So it's basically you can manually map the alternative security identifiers in the AD, uh, or you can actually issue the certificates if at all you are issuing the certificates directly from an on-prem AD services to the users and devices. In the certificate template itself, you can actually imprint that security identifiers using the object ID. Or if at all you are issuing the certificates via Intune for a manual or offline certificates, then also we require an update. Okay, so it's ultimately whenever you are issuing the certificate, renewing the certificate for users and devices, by adding one more additional parameter to your certificate, that parameter is nothing but the security identifier, that's when this ISE update is required for. And what exactly is that? It's basically you can have different security identifiers in the different formats. You can see that the subject alternative name, as I was highlighting in the right side of it, it was already having a GUID. What we were asking you to do it for an MDM integration, having the GUID parameter. The second one is a security identifier. This is the specific format which Microsoft was asking you to update each and every certificate with. So each and every certificate is going to have the security identifier imprinted into it so that it knows that certificate enumeration is not possible, emulation is not possible, and it is indeed given to a specific user and specific device. Because of this, you can have a multiple formats. You can interchange it. The first one could be a security identifier. The second one can be GUID, or you can even have more number of attributes in the subject alternative name itself. You can have user principal name, email ID, fully qualified domain name, security identifier, plus the GUID, so on and so forth. You can add as many attributes as you can. Because of these many different formats possible to issue the new certificates to the endpoints, the ISE update is required. We'll see how those are impacting because of these changes, how ISE use cases are impacted. There are basically two use cases which are impacted because of this. The first case is whenever the certificate based authentication is happening against ISE now, users and devices are going to present their certificate to ISE. And if you look at the first certificate and second certificate, you could clearly see the subject alternative name format is different. The first one is having the UPN, GUID, and SID. The second one was having SID, UPN, GUID. You can even have for an iOS and Android devices, you can have all these into one single SAN URI itself. Because of those many formats are possible, when it comes to the certificate based oh God. When it comes to the certificate based authentication, ICE is going to validate that certificate given to the ICE by through the SCEP and the CRL mechanism against the certificate authorities. Additionally, you can also do a binary comparison because I want, hey, this UPN has to be validated against my Active Directory. As probably the email has to be validated against my Active Directory. That lookup is possible. But this is applicable. The ICE impact, the case one, whatever I was telling you, is an impact whenever you have subject alternative name specifically selected under the certificate authentication profile. In the certificate authentication profile, you can specify what attribute you're supposed to look up against the domain controller. If it happens to be a subject alternative name, a general one, and you have so many different fields within the subject alternative name itself, ICE will not be able to identify, hey, which one is a username, which one is UPN, which one is an email address. Because of that binary comparison is failing, the authentication itself is going to fail. That's the first use case which is going to be impacted. The second case is where you look at the parameters in the certificate. The GUID was part of the second field in first certificate. In the second certificate, it is third field. So basically, ICE has to parse it where exactly that GUID was. Earlier, it was not having that capability. That was the reason why it was not able to identify and extract that GUID value from the SAN field and look up against the Intune. So because of that, the MDM integration would also fail. So these are the two impacted use cases from the ICE standpoint. Okay, what is the impact? We have known it. Then what is the fix for this? The fix is simply to apply the patch. These patches on the relevant releases, if you're there on a 3.1, you have to apply a patch 10 or later. If you're there on a 3.2, you can apply patch 7 or later, patch 4 or later on a 3.3, patch 1 or later on a 3.4. These patches are going to actually enhance the parsing logic so that it can extract the GUID value and it can look up against the Intune. Now, as another workaround, there is a workaround possible as well. So instead of selecting a specific subject alternative name, you have another option called any subject or alternative name can be looked up against the Active Directory. This is only possible for the Active Directory lookups alone. So instead of specifying a specific attribute of the certificate, you have one more option to choose. It's going to pick, ICE is going to pick any of these certificate subject alternative name. It could be a first entry, second entry, third entry, and it's going to be used against the lookups against the Active Directory for resolving the ambiguities. So whoever is doing the certificate-based authentication plus the MDM integration, this workaround can be possible without even applying the patch. If at all you are looking for a patch, it's basically to extract the GUID and get it updated. So this is applicable especially for a certificate-based authentication, the workaround. But whereas for the GUID extraction, you still need patch. Okay. Now, before diving into the demo part of it or how Intune was modifying it, etc., I wanted to actually let you know by going back to the basics. So let's get started on that. As an administrator, you're going to be logging into the PPAN and you're going to be doing all the configuration changes on the PPAN itself. All those configuration changes are going to be synced across all the nodes in your ICE deployment, even to the PSNs, even to the MNTs as well. When the endpoints are actually getting connected over the wide wireless VPN and a 5G, over the radius or a TechAX-based authentications, basically, they're going to be served by your respective PSNs configured in your network devices. For an authentication purposes, it's going to look up against the external identity stores. And once the authentication is successful, it's going to authorize with the different parameters like you can enforce SGT, ACL, DACL, etc. And all these events, logging into the PPAN, making a configuration change, authentication, authorization, everything is an event. All these events can be visualized from your own ICE deployment itself, or you can even send all these log events to the external log servers such as Splunk or an SIEM servers. Now, basically, you are doing a authentication against external identity stores, and on top of it, you can add the MDM integration for the authorization purposes. So ISE so far can be integrated with these many MDM vendors. These are the different MDM vendors that you could integrate with ISE against with. So it's basically you are validating against external identity stores for the authentication, and then you are adding as part of an authorization for an MDM compliance check. So when you integrate MDM server with ISE, as part of an authorization, you can look up against MDM server and look for the compliance check, whether it is registered, compliant or not, device jailbroken or not, pin lock is enabled or not, or disk encryption was enabled or not, etc. So many parameters are available for your usage. So, but when you are integrating ISE with an MDM vendor, there are two APIs are possible. Two API versions are possible. You can integrate both of them via MDM version 2 API or MDM version 3 API. You might be wondering what exactly they are, MDM version 2 and MDM version 3. Let's look at it. So MDM v2 API is purely based on the MAC address. So when the endpoints are connected over the wired, wireless, or a VPN or a 5G, the radius request is going to be access request is going to be initiated on behalf of endpoint, and that radius access request itself is going to contain the calling station ID, and that calling station ID is nothing but the MAC address. Using that MAC address, ICE is going to query the MDM server, get the response. Hey, what is the detail of that device is, serial number, pin log, phone number, etc. All these, and then based on these attribute values, you can basically give the differentiated access. For this to work, both the MDM vendor and your ICE is supposed to be integrated over MDM v2 API. Even MDM server is supposed to implement the MDM v2 API. But remember one thing, these parameters which were shared by the MDM server is going to vary based on the different MDM vendors. We're going to come down to that part later point of time. Now, what? Okay, well, that is going to work. Then what exactly the problem? Well, the problem is basically your actual MAC address of these devices, because the MDM v2 API is going to make use of the MAC address as a query parameter. If the endpoint actual MAC address is not matching with the radius calling station ID because of MAC randomization, docking stations, dongles. If you put your endpoint, connect your endpoint over the docking station, or if you connect it to the network over dongles, or if the MAC randomization was already enabled on the endpoint, obviously you're not gonna see the actual MAC address as part of the radius access request. So because of that reason, obviously, ICE is making a query, but with a fault MAC address or invalid MAC address. Obviously, you're not going to get a response, and you cannot give a differentiated access based on that. That was the reason why we came up with a MAC plus GUID based queries, which was introduced in 3.1 onwards. This is purely, the GUID is purely imprinted into the certificate. So whoever is actually managing these devices via the MDM vendor, the certificate based authentication, through the certificate based authentication, the certificate is going to be given to the ICE, and ICE is going to pass the certificate attributes and grab the GUID. You can imprint the certificate GUID into the certificate common name or certificate subject alternative name. It's up to you, whichever is feasible. So it's going to extract that GUID value, and it's going to be used against the MDM server for querying purposes to get the values. Once we get the value, obviously we can give the differentiated access. For this to work, both the MDM server and ICE are supposed to be in compliant with an MDM version 3 API. So, well, okay, out of all those many MDM vendors that we could integrate with ICE, what are the MDM version 3 API compliant vendors are? Let's look at them. There are 5 different MDM vendors possible, which are compliant with an MDM version 3 API. Currently, Meraki, Intune, Ivanti, Jamf, Omnicia. These are the MDM vendors which are already compliant against the MDM v3 API. So basically, you can do the GUID based queries against these MDM vendors to get the response out of these MDM vendors. So how it works? So when these users and devices connected to the network and when they participate in the certificate based authentication, ICE is going to get that certificate. ICE is going to extract that certificate, read the values, and then as part of the certificate authentication profile, which is used for validating the certificate, it's going to look, hey, is this valid or not? So basically, it's going to look for whether it was given by a valid certificate authority or not. And the certificate is indeed valid or not through the SCEP and CRL methods. Then on top of it, you can also do a binary comparison by extracting these additional attributes from the certificate. You can also look up against your Active Directory or even LDAP. That's possible in ICE. It's not only binary comparison is possible only with the ID. It's also possible to do a binary comparison with an LDAP as well. So once after the authentication is successful, the binary comparison is also, which is an optional piece, is successful. Then as part of an authorization, the extracted values, the GUID values or the MAC address is going to be queried against the MDM vendor and it's going to get the response back. So ultimately, MDM v2 API is purely based on the MAC address, whereas MDM v3 is GUID inserted into the certificate, SAN field or a common name field. Obviously, MDM v3 is certificate-based authentication, so it's more secure than the MDM v2 API. Because of a MAC randomization, it's not as secure as MDM v3 API is. So MAC randomization, dongle, docking stations are addressed in the MDM v3 API. But from an operational standpoint, obviously, you know this. You need to provision the certificates accordingly because you have to insert the GUID values and then you have to manage and operate it. And based on the different operating systems that you are managing via MDM vendor, you might have to actually create a different templates, different profiles, different policies in order to provision and do an operation and maintenance around it. So that's a challenging part of it. It's not a overhead, but it's a secure. It's a one-time duty. Once you set it up, it's going to be very easy. Then we have a one more feature as well, which was allowing ICE to fall back to the second MDM server or third MDM server. So you can integrate even multiple MDM vendors in earlier releases also, but there was no fallback mechanism from one vendor to another vendor. In 3.2, we address that concern. So when a new device coming onto the network, it's going to be queried using the MDM vendor 1. If it is not registered or if it is not enrolled against the first MDM vendor, it's going to fall back to the second MDM vendor. If it is not registered or enrolled against a second MDM vendor as well, it's going to fall back to the third MDM vendor. Or this fallback mechanism is also applicable if the first MDM vendor is not giving the response back properly. So this feature was available starting from 3.2 onwards. There are optimization which was already possible irrespective of MDM version 2 or in version 3, but I just wanted to give you what are those optimizations. The first one is a compliance cache expiration time. What is that? Basically, when the endpoint is actually connected to these network, it's not one single time they're going to be connecting through, especially when you're talking about the mobile devices or our laptops. Most nowadays we were making use of a wireless. So when you go for a cup of coffee or when you go for a break and come back again, there is going to be another radius request coming into it. So whenever you associate to the SSID or whenever you connect to the network again and again, those many times ICE is going to query the MDM server, get the response back, and give you the privileges. So how many times you are getting the access request, those many times we were doing the query. So instead of that, you could also you can also actually cache it. So you can configure this caching interval in the ICE so that ICE keeps the response in its cache. So what happens whenever the next time the endpoint coming onto the network, because it was already cached in the ICE itself, ICE doesn't do any query against MDM vendor at all when you reconnected the endpoint to the network. So ICE, the number of requests going towards the MDM vendor is going to be drastically reduced because of this cache complaints. So, but do optimize your compliance expiration time. If you are if you are configuring it for a bigger time interval, obviously you are actually you don't know what exactly the latest compliance of that endpoint is. So you might have to actually tweak this compliance cache as per your need. The second optimization is actually polling interval. When is it applicable? When all these endpoints coming onto the network, ICE queries the MDM vendor. Let's say out of 10,000 endpoints that are getting authenticated against ICE, you got probably, let's say, 200 to 300 endpoints going out of compliance. So you have given them the restricted access because of this non-compliance, right? So because of this non-compliance, they're going to be staying in that non-compliance access forever until and unless they get connected to it, right? Beyond the expiration time. So in order to avoid this, what we have is called a polling interval. What it does is ICE does a bulk query using all those 200 or 300 endpoints which are non-compliant. It's going to do a bulk query against the MDM vendor and it's going to get the response back. If there is any change of out of these 200 or 300 non-compliant endpoints, if there is any device which is coming back to the compliant access, then ICE is going to automatically do a COA so that it's not going to stay in the non-compliant access forever. It can be given with a compliant access by doing a COA. So whenever for Alice iPad, if it was changed from non-compliant to compliant, ICE is going to issue the COA to the respective device so that it gets the compliant access instead of non-compliant access. These are the two optimizations possible, irrespective of MDM integrations, and you can configure them as well. Now let's get into the specific topic, Intune, the reason of actually this webinar. Now look at this. I have already shown you. Ah, God. Okay. You have already seen this slide earlier. Remember this. Each MDM has different shared MDM attributes with. If the MDM vendor is changing, let's say the Intune specifically, Intune doesn't share those many attributes at all. Precisely, it's sharing these 4 attributes alone. It's not only with Cisco ISE alone, any NAC product that it is getting integrated with, Microsoft Intune was only sharing these 4 attributes alone as part of this NAC 2.0 APIs. So this, you don't have so many choices in order to build the differentiated access. Precisely saying, you can only say, as long as it is registered and compliant, you can give compliant access. As long as it is registered non-compliant, you give non-compliant access. If at all it is not registered, then you give restricted access or URL redirects or whatever it is. So it's basically you don't have a much of choice. You can only make use of registration status and the compliance status alone. That's what it makes. That's what it means. that's what the Microsoft Intune was sharing with us, so that you can only create two conditions alone for MDM integration specifically. Now, uh, coming back to the security identifiers, as I was stating in that article, this Microsoft update is more towards mapping the security identifiers into your certificates, so that certificate emulation is not possible. If Pawan is the one who is getting authenticated using the certificate, so Active Directory is gonna validate. If at all you're doing a manual map, Active Directory is going to look up into the users or a device properties for these alt security identifiers, so that it is indeed okay, it is indeed given to the Pawan's device and Pawan's user. So the second method is issuing the certificate by imprinting the certificate, by imprinting the security identifiers into the certificate itself. When you are reissuing the certificate, obviously there are two choices for you. Probably you might be or not be making use of Intune at all. If at all it is pure on-prem AD itself, through on-prem AD itself, you can issue the certificate by adding the users or device security identifier into the certificate itself by modifying your certificate templates, so that you can issue the new certificates having the security identifiers into it. Or there is a second possibility: if you are managing all these devices via Intune, for a manual and offline certificate provisioning through the Intune itself, you can also actually add these security identifiers into the certificate. So that is where we were supposed to update the ISE with. How do we provision the certificate from an Intune? There are three possibilities. Uh, Via skip method, you can issue the certificate. Via PKCS method also, you can actually issue the certificate to the endpoints. Or you can also integrate the third-party SCEP servers to issue the new certificate. So Microsoft SCEP, PKCS, or third-party SCEP services to issue the new certificates to the endpoints by adding the security identifiers into the certificate itself. Now, how it works? Intune, basically, when you are managing these endpoints via Intune, the agent running on these devices gets the request from the Intune itself to generate the CSR, certificate signing request. That certificate signing request itself, the payload itself, is going to contain to which SCEP service it is supposed to reach out to get the certificate. So because the payload itself in the first step itself is going to contain to which SCEP service it is supposed to reach out to, these endpoints are going to generate the certificate signing request and then put it to your SCEP service. The SCEP service in turn validates it and then forwards it to the respective certificate authorities, get the new certificate, and that SCEP is going to give the certificate back to the endpoints, whoever is requesting for the new certificates. Now, when you are actually provisioning the certificate through the Intune itself, you have this SCEP certificate and the PKCS certificate templates. You can basically add these parameters, your GUID, on-premise security identifier, or your on-premise security identifier plus GUID and security identifier, or even you can have more attributes added into the SCEP profile so that you can provision the certificate with a different subject alternative name attributes into it. Because of that, you end up having different certificates with a different certificate attributes, especially in the subject alternative name. Microsoft was asking you to add these on-premise security identifiers into the subject alternative name. If it happens to be without this Microsoft update, you might be having a subject alternative name with just a UPN or a username or email address. In that case, it's very easy to look up against Active Directory. because of this Microsoft update change and plus MDM integration, you have multiple attributes in the subject alternative name itself. And you can even add more and more attributes into the subject alternative name, like UPN, email, DNS, etc. So let's look it into the action. I know there is so much talk, and without it going through the demo, it's not easy to consume all this. Let's dive into the demo so that you can understand it better. So let's log into the Cisco ISE and let's verify the version. I'm making use of 3.4 patch 1. Let's verify the deployment as well. I have 6 nodes in my deployment. ISE node 21 and 22 are my primary and secondary administrative dedicated nodes. ISE node 23 and 24 are my primary monitoring and secondary monitoring dedicated nodes. 25 and 26 are my policy service and PXPlate persona. Both of them are enabled on that. Let's verify the external identities also. I have 2 domain controllers, of course. I have multiple devices managed via dominion.in, territory.in. Whoever is actually getting authenticated with, sorry, just so whoever is using authentication against the domain controllers, respective domain controllers, all these nodes are already joined to the domain controller. Okay, even my territory.in to territory.in domain controller also, my ISE nodes were joined. So this is my certificate authentication profile, wherein you're going to be extracting those values and you're going to be using the certificate attributes lookups against the Active Directories or an LDAP. So ideally speaking, you can simply select none as an identity store. That means you're not selecting anything for a lookup. You are just doing a certificate based authentication and certificate validity. That's it. But you do have a choice to make use of AD or an LDAP for lookups. So I'm making use of a territory domain controller for a lookups against the Active Directory, just for this demonstration purpose. And what do we want to look up against? The certificate attributes. These are the certificate attributes which are possible for you to look up. You can use common name, subject alternative name, uh, serial number, subject alternative name, other name. That means it's a UPN, user principal name. I don't know why they named it that way. Email, DNS, etc. So these are the different parameters that you can actually make use in order to look up against the Active Directory or an LDAP. Specifically for this topic, I was making use of an Active Directory lookup. So those values, you are basically selecting, hey, this is my certificate subject alternative name. You should use this subject alternative name as a parameter to look up against Active Directory validation in order to resolve the identity ambiguity. That's what the first option is what for. Whereas you have a second option, if you have a multiple attributes in the certificate itself, and you don't know which one is supposed to be used for um, common name, which one is supposed to be, I mean, the common name is supposed to be used, or a subject alternative name, email address is supposed to be used, or a subject alternative name, UPN is supposed to be used, then you have a choice of actually selecting this second option, wherein ICE is going to use any one of these subject or subject alternative names to look up against Active Directory. This option is only possible with an Active Directory alone. So I'm going to be selecting the certificate subject alternative name just for a lookups. And let's verify the MDM integration also. This is my integration. I've already integrated my ISE with an MDM. It's a mobile device manager. And Intune supports OAuth integration. And I've provided all the details that were required. and I have left all the default values. Of course, just to tell you, this device compliance timeout is what is going to be used in order to fall back to the second MDM vendor. So after 30,000 milliseconds, that means around 30 seconds, it's going to fall back to the second MDM vendor. But for this webinar, it's not applicable, of course. I'm not actually having any multiple MDM vendors, but you can actually make use of this in order to fall back to the second MDM and then vendor, third MDM vendor, etc. The next parameter is compliance cache expiration time. So instead of leaving the defaults, I increased it to 100 minutes so that ICE is going to cache the response for 100 minutes duration. Within that 100 minutes duration, if the endpoint is reconnecting, re-authenticating multiple times, no matter how many times it's going to get authenticated with, it's going to use ICE cached values. ICE is not going to do any extra queries against MDM vendor at all. So it's going to drastically reduce the number of MDM queries going towards the MDM vendors. And these are the different identifiers that you could make use of to query against the MDM vendor. These are possible only with an MDM v3 API. MDM v2 API, these options are not going to be visible. For all the MDM v3 compliant vendors, device identifiers are going to be shown up automatically for you to select which device identifier is supposed to be used to query against the MDM vendor. You can drag and drop. You can select what attribute that you want. Specifically, I'm selecting a subject alternative name URI, wherein we have a GUID imprinted into it. So ICE is going to extract the GUID value imprinted into the certificate SAN URI, and it's going to use that as a query mechanism to get the response from the MDM, especially Intune. If it is not found, I still wanted to go with an older behavior like legacy MAC address. So that was the reason why I was making use of these two identifiers as a query mechanism against the Intune to get the response from the Intune. Oh God. Shit. So once after doing that, let's dive into the Intune part of it. Let's look into the policy sets. So this is my MDM policy set, which is applicable for all the devices connected over wired, wireless, VPN, IoT, even any other locations have an MDM endpoints. It's going to match with this policy set. If you look at the authentication policies, because we are talking about certificate-based authentication, I've created a specifically a policy, authentication policy called CertAuth. Whoever is doing the certificate-based authentication, the endpoints point participating in the certificate-based authentication over ETLS protocol, they're going to be using the certificate authentication profile that I have created or I have shown you. For the rest of the protocols, I'm making use of all user identity stores in which my multiple domain controllers LDAP is already there. For all my wired or wireless map endpoints, I'm making use of internal endpoints for the querying purposes. Now let's look at the authorization policies. I don't want to go into all those 16 authorization policies. Just look at only 2 authorization policies which are applicable here. I have MDM compliant and non-compliant policy, authorization policy. Basically, when the endpoint is getting authenticated over certificate-based authentication, and if the MDM says it's a compliant, then I wanted to give the employee access and employee SGT. If they are non-compliant or not registered, I'm giving the same access called restricted access and quarantine systems SGT. Now with that, let's look at the Intune configuration also. You have seen ISE configuration so far. Let's look at how Intune can be configured as well. Through Intune, you can basically manage all your devices. When you are saying managing the devices, you can basically push all the policies, profiles, compliance checks, um, even wired wireless uh, profiles into the devices, the managed devices. So accordingly, you might have to create multiple policies for different operating systems. Just for the demonstration purpose, I do have an iOS and iPad a test VPN policy wherein that's a VPN policy template wherein we can imprint the GUID specifically as part of that test VPN profile. But I'm making use of a Windows for this demonstration purpose. So first three are applicable. The first three are something like a SCEP. Through SCEP, I'm issuing the certificates. And the second and third one are my certificates policies. So let's look at the SCEP certificate profile. If you look at this is the SCEP profile or a policy which is going to be pushed to the endpoints being managed via Intune. When an endpoint is being managed via Intune, you're asking the devices, hey, create a signing request by having a subject name, by putting its own username. And you can also have a subject alternative names. The subject alternative name could be so many attributes. Just for the demonstration purpose, I was adding these three parameters. GUID, as Cisco was actually recommending you to add it. This is how the format of the GUID need to be imprinted into the certificate subject alternative name so that we would be able to extract the GUID from that device ID parameter and can be used as a query mechanism to Intune get the device compliance status. The second one is a user principal name, and third one is an on-premise security identifier. You can also actually mix and match. You can basically, the on-premise security identifier, it's not going to be used for attribute lookup against AD at all. So you can even actually reconfigure this profile. Just for the demonstration purpose, I'm actually modifying it. So instead of having the first one as a GUID, you can even have it as a third one. So the first one is your user principal name. The second one is your on-premise security identifier. You cannot actually use it for querying the AD, lookups against AD. And this is how Microsoft was asking you to put it exactly. And you cannot even club it with any other parameter. On-premise security identifier has to go in one single URI. You can even add more and more subject alternative name attributes like email address or probably fully qualified domain name. It's your wish. Basically, Intune was allowing us to create or provision the certificate with the different attributes with any order. So it was also actually having how many months the certificate is supposed to be valid for. And I'm enrolling. I don't have a TPM on my endpoint. So I'm enrolling against the software KSP. It is the certificate issued is meant for the digital signature purpose with a key size of 2048 bit and an algorithm. And as part of an extended key usage, I was making use of a secure email and a client authentication purposes. And this is what is important. In the SCEP profile itself, you are mentioning what is the SCEP URL that is supposed to be reached out to in order to get the certificate. So this is the URL which endpoint is going to be reached out to once after generating the certificate signing request. So the certificate signing request with all the parameters are going to be generated and put it down to this SCEP server. So this is very important. Oh God, shit. This is very important because the endpoints are reaching out to this SCEP server to get the new certificate. So before even actually getting the certificate, obviously the endpoints are supposed to trust the enterprise CA or a root CAs, whatever is. I do have two CAs, uh, two hierarchies, certificate authority, the root CA and the subordinate is the enterprise CA. So I was actually pushing the enterprise CA certificate and the root CA certificate as well as part of the trusted templates. So let's go into the endpoint and see how we can enroll and get the device compliance from. This is how you can actually register or enroll your device. I'm taking a Windows device just for the demonstration purpose. I'm adding a work or school account by providing a username, password, and if the MFA is enabled, obviously it's going to prompt me for an MFA. And if the MFA is successful, it's going to actually register or enroll this device into the Intune. So it's going to take a couple of seconds for it to register itself. Once the registration is done, through the company portal app in the Windows, especially, it's going to be the device is going to be managed. Consider this as an agent. So this agent, company portal agent, is basically allowing you to push the configuration all the way from the Intune. So this was you can even leave it as is and let the Intune to push the profile and policies and compliance checks to the user or device on its own, or you can even manually go and sync it. So because I don't want to waste the time, I want to actually sync the device manually. I don't want to wait for the sync to happen on its own. So I manually syncing it. While the sync is happening, for the troubleshooting purpose, because I encountered so many problems while doing this integration, I thought of actually showing you how I troubleshooted it. When the company portal app is is managing your endpoint, all the audit logs are going into, if you open the event viewer on your endpoint itself, you can find all the relevant logs under application and services logs, underneath that Microsoft, underneath that Windows. And if you expand furthermore, you'll find device management enterprise diagnostic provider, wherein you have three more admin autopilot operation. Under admin is what actually all the operations goes into. And if you look at this event ID called 36, it represents the SCEP certificate request was generated to the NDS URL successfully. It's a very good sign to see it. After so many attempts, I was able to successfully get integrated with. And because the SCEP certificate request was generated successfully and it posted to the NDS, it got the certificate as part of that CSR, and it installed successfully on my endpoint. So look for that 36 and 39, which are good signs for you in the event ID. And because now the certificate was issued on the endpoint, I'm going into my manage user certificates. And if I refresh it, I got the new certificate. And if you look at this was given by my enterprise CA. This enterprise CA is nothing but my root subordinate for my root CA. So it's a two-level certificate authority. Root CA is not the one who is issuing the certificate to my endpoints. The territory enterprise CA is what the issuing authority for all my users and devices. And if you look at the certificate attributes, especially the subject, remember whatever this SCEP profile that we were policy that we were pushing down to the endpoints, using that SCEP profile, the CSR is going to be generated. If you remember correctly, the subject was nothing but the username. So it's the test user is my username. And let's look at the subject alternative name. The subject alternative name has three parameters, three subject alternative names. One is URI, the first one, which we are asking you to put the GUID value into. And you can even have a second additional attribute called principal name, like a UPN value. And I do have a third one because of a Microsoft update. It it was asking us to map the security identifiers into the certificate itself. The Microsoft was specifically asking you to add that on-premise security identifier or the security identifiers in this specific format. Tag colon Microsoft.com colon blah blah blah, and SID is the user SID value. So it's going to automatically retrieve the SID from my on-premise security identifier, on-premise AD, and it's going to imprint that value to issue the certificate to my device. Now that's how I got this certificate with. So these are there are different ways or different formats are possible. You can even have multiple subject alternative names even. So because I was having uh, uh, user principal name in the subject alternative name, what I'm going to do is, instead of specifying a subject alternative name, I'm going to be choosing UPN value, because the UPN was already there in the certificate for the attribute lookup. So instead of selecting subject alternative name alone, if you select subject alternative name, what's going to happen? ISE is going to get confused, and ISE is going to extract the GUID, and it's going to look using that GUID value against the AD, which is not valid. Or ISE is going to grab the SID value, and it's going to be used to look up against the Active Directory, which is not valid. So that was the reason why, instead of making use of subject alternative name alone, I'm making use of subject alternative name user principal name, which was already available in my certificate. Or additionally, you can also make use of the second option. Any subject alternative name or attribute in the certificate can be looked up against Active Directory. If you have a different templates for different operating systems, you can always go with a second option, which will ease out your operation standpoint. And from an MDM standpoint, as you have seen, the GUID value was there as part of the SAN URI field itself. But it could be the first SAN field itself, or it could be the GUID could be in SAN URI first field itself, or second field, or third field. This is where the fix is applicable in order to extract the GUID value irrespective of how in the first value, second, or third field it is. So ICE is going to extract irrespective of whether it is there in the first or second or third SAN fields. Now let's take this as a certificate authentication. Let's verify my network adapter properties, whether I have enabled the .1x authentication order. Yes, indeed. And it is going through the certificate-based authentication. Just to ensure, I'm going to be disabling it, and I'm going to be enabling it back, so that I'm going to be submitting the new certificate, which was issued by the Intune, to connect to the network. So the certificate-based authentication happened now. Because the certificate-based authentication happened successfully now, I'm going to move over to the ISE. And if you look at it, that's my endpoint. It got authenticated successfully. And if you look at specifically, it matched with MDM policy set. Yes, that's correct. The second one is certificate authentication policy, it is matched with, where it was looking for the certificate authentication profile and lookups. It matched with MDM compliant policy, wherein we were looking for MDM query against Intune and getting the response back. If you further go down, you will also find that this endpoint is indeed getting authenticated over .1x. Yes, it is making use of EPTLS based authentication through some network device and over so and so port. And you can also find additional attributes, something like a common name, subject alternative name, the first field, which is GUID. The second one is nothing but the UPN value. The third one is an SID. You can view all these parameters. Along with that, you can also view much more certificate attribute details. SAM account name, TLS version, issuing authority, issuing authority common name, so on and so forth. all these are available in the ISE itself. Now, once the certificate authentication is done through CRL validation, ISE is going to extract the subject alternative name UPN value. You remember that's what we selected under certificate authentication profile to do a lookup against the Active Directory. So it's resolving using that UPN value. It's trying to go into the Active Directory territory and it's trying to look for that account, matching account in that forest. It found one matching account. That was the reason why both certificate authentication plus attribute lookup was successful. That's where the authentication is succeeded. If any one of this is failing, let's say your certificate authentication against the certificate authorities over OCSP or a CRL is failing, or attribute lookup against the AD is failing, your authentication itself is going to fail. This is the reason why we want you to actually modify the certificate authentication profile, or you imprint the probably the GUIDs and SIDs respectively and select the certificate authentication profile accordingly. And once the authentication is successful, you can also see that there is a PIP call. PIP means policy information point. This is a query call. So ISE is making a query to Intune for an MDM device compliance check, where it found that it is compliant. That is the reason why it matched with that MDM compliant policy with. How do I know that it is indeed doing the MDM compliance query? If I go back to the ISE again, reports, go to the endpoints and users, you have a specifically external mobile device management report. You can clearly see that it got authenticated against the ISE Node 25 PSN. The identity which was extracted is UPN. It was being managed via this Intune vendor. This is my MAC address. And I got the response from that MDM vendor, Intune. The registration status is successful. MDM is compliance status is also compliant. You can also actually copy this MAC address and you can even search it from the context visibility. If you go to the context visibility, search for this MAC address, you'll find all these attributes straight away. So if you click on this, you'll end up seeing the drawer window instead of actually navigating to the another window. You can be on the same context visibility screen and you can immediately glance through all the attributes for that endpoint. You can see that this is TLS based authentication. It matched with MDM and it's compliant with what are the certificate attributes. And if you're really looking for more and more attributes, you can basically click on that link icon to see all the attributes. Especially, I'm worried about MDM compliance, whether it is true or not. Yes, it is indeed true. MDM enrolled, yes, it is registered and enrolled against Intune. It is true. And the rest of the MDM parameters. But remember, all these MDM parameters are not shared by the Intune. So the jailbroken, let's say the MDM server, what do we call? MDM server name is imprinted or updated by the ISE, not by your Intune. MDM server reachability, it's updated by the ISE, not by your Intune. Okay, so if you look at the MDM jailbroken or disk encryption, they are not shared via Intune. So don't create a policy using those parameters. It's not going to be shared. So that's how basically you are doing a certificate-based authentication. Look up against the Active Directory using the certificate attributes and doing the MDM integration. I hope I made it clear. With that, I want you to leave with. I want to leave you with these resources. Any outstanding questions before I wrap up, Rigo? I know I have actually overran 10 minutes more.
Oh, good. This is all great content, Pavid. Thank you so much. I was looking at our panel here for Q&A, and it looks like our panelists have actually done a great job of addressing all of the questions through Slido. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up if you don't have any closing comments.
Nothing. It's basically, this is intended for the Microsoft update. If at all you're using the Microsoft domain controllers or certificates services, or if at all you're making use of ISE and MDM integration, that's where this webinar is going to be helpful for you. I hope I made it clear. Thanks a lot, folks, for joining.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pavan. So just want to give you a very big thanks for speaking about this topic with our audience. I hope that everyone found great value in the information and the presentation and the resources that were shared here today. I also want to extend a very big thank you to each and every one of our panelists for lending a hand with the questions throughout the event. We really appreciate it. And for our attendees, if you do have any additional questions or would like to continue the conversation about today's topic, we do encourage you to participate in our online post-webinar discussion. The link is available in your Slido resources on the left-hand side. So if you do have any additional questions that might come up at a later time, feel free to just post them in that discussion thread. And just one reminder that we have launched our short survey in Slido, and we would be so grateful if you can just lend us a minute of your time to complete it and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback on these events. And for those interested in revisiting the session, we will have the recording available on demand within about 5 business days after today. And the link on how you can access that recording is available in your Slido resources as well. So feel free to save that link to refer to it at your convenience after the 5 days. And just one quick reminder that our next ICE event is coming up on May 27th. That's going to be a Tuesday. And the topic we're going to be covering is ICE certificates with Let's Encrypt. If you haven't registered for this session, please feel free to do so scanning that QR code on your screen. And we look forward to seeing you in our next event. Thanks again to our presenter, Pavan, to all of our panelists, and to all of our attendees for joining us here live today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on the Cisco Learning Network. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.